On live TV, the baddest man on the planet cried. Not for fame, not for a fight, but because a boy turned president from West Africa finally saw the broken child hiding behind the gloves. He walked in like a legend, calm, composed, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. Mike Tyson, former heavyweight champion of the world, was scheduled to talk about his Netflix series and new memoir. No one, not even Tyson himself, was ready for what would happen next. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the host smiled at the camera. "Mike," she said warmly, "you've seen it all. But today, we have something you didn't expect." Tyson leaned back slightly, his eyebrow raised. "What's that?" A producer stepped forward with a cream-colored envelope, gold lettering sealed by hand. "This letter arrived from Burkina Faso last night," the host explained. "From President Ibrahim Traoré. And it's for you." The room grew still. Even Mike's breathing shifted. A letter? From a president? For him? He nodded slowly. "Read it," he whispered. This wasn't about a fan letter. This was a mirror. A message from one survivor to another. What happened next would silence millions. The host unfolded the paper. Her voice steadied, but even she could feel the weight. "Dear Mr. Tyson, I do not write to you as a politician, but as a boy who once had nothing." Mike blinked. "I watched you fight on a flickering TV, standing in a dusty room with other kids. No shoes, no food. But in your eyes, I saw power. Not fists. Power. Pain turned into fire." Tyson leaned forward, his fingers twitching. His lips tightened. "When my country hurt, I remembered your stare in the ring. Not your punches, your refusal to kneel. That stare helped me rise. Thank you, Mike Tyson. Not for the knockouts, but for the courage." The letter trembled slightly in the host's hands. And so did Mike. The man once feared across continents was fighting something he couldn't dodge. Emotion. For a moment he said nothing, then came the whisper. "He saw me." The audience froze. The cameras didn't cut away. No one dared move. Tyson wasn't reading words. He was reliving a lifetime of wounds finally recognized, and soon the tears would come. "I was 14, Mike began. Homeless, angry. I wanted to disappear back then. I fought because it was the only way anyone saw me." His voice cracked. He looked away, swallowing hard. "But this letter from a president? From a boy who had nothing?" He looked up, right into the camera. "That broke me." And then it happened. Tears. Slow, then heavier. The former Iron Mike wept. Some say it was the most powerful live TV moment in years, not because Mike cried, but because of why he cried. Across the ocean, in a quiet office in Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traoré watched the moment in silence, his hand covering his mouth, eyes glossy. Behind him, a wall filled not with political portraits, but photos of barefoot children, farmers, soldiers, and one old photo of a young Mike Tyson. Fists up, eyes burning. Traoré whispered in French. He really felt it. One letter bridged continents. 2 men, 2 battles, but the same pain. What happened next would change both their lives forever. Later that night, Mike couldn't sleep. The cameras were gone. The applause had faded, but the letter? Still in his hand. When his phone rang, he stared at the screen. Unknown number. International code. He picked up. "Mike Tyson," he said. A pause. A calm, low voice replied, "Mr. Tyson, this is Ibrahim Traoré." Mike stood up slowly. "You're the guy from the letter?" "Yes," Traoré answered. "And you're the man who helped me survive when I had nothing, no shoes, no food. But your pain taught me to rise." They didn't speak like legends, they spoke like survivors. "What you said today," Traoré added gently, "healed something. In me, in you, in all of us. There was a silence. Then Traoré asked something impossible. Mike, would you come to Burkina Faso? Mike blinked. What for? Not for a fight, Traoré replied. For hope. The next morning, Mike ripped up his schedule. Press tours, brand deals, endorsements. Cancel them all, he said to his team. I'm going to Africa. They stared in disbelief. You serious? Mike didn't flinch. It's not about boxing anymore. It's about the boy I was, and the boy's still out there. He wasn't flying to fight. He was flying to heal. And for the first time in decades, Mike Tyson was stepping into the unknown. Not as a champion, but as a wounded soul searching for meaning. 2 days later, a dust-covered plane landed in Ouagadougou. No red carpet, no paparazzi. Just children, barefoot, running beside his convoy, screaming, Mike Tyson! Mike Tyson! But this wasn't hero worship. This was kinship. The president met him, not in a palace, but in a modest compound. No rehearsed smiles, just a firm handshake. That lasted longer than most speeches. They didn't talk politics. They talked pain. Traoré took Mike to a school on the edge of the city. Cracked walls, dirt floors. But joy danced in the air. One boy had a black eye from a street fight. Mike sat next to him. You fight? He asked gently. The boy nodded. Mike smiled. Me too. But you know what the strongest punch is? The boy looked confused. It's the one you don't throw. He took off his championship ring and handed it to the boy. For just a moment. The boy's hands trembled, and for a heartbeat, time stood still. That day, the world saw something it rarely sees. Power meeting vulnerability, and choosing healing. That night, on a quiet rooftop, under a sky full of African stars, Traoré gave Mike a wooden box. Inside, dozens of handwritten letters from children. One read, Dear Mike Tyson, you are a lion who made it through fire. Please don't forget us. Another, My papa died protecting our village. But now I believe I can be strong like you. Mike held the letters like they were gold. These, he whispered, are worth more than any belt I ever won. Traoré nodded. Now you see, brother. Pain connects us more than fame ever could. Some warriors fight in rings. Others fight in silence. But that night, under the stars of Burkina Faso, 2 broken men found a battlefield called healing, and they weren't alone. Mike Tyson sat under the vast African sky, wind brushing through the letters in his hands. He wasn't reading fan mail. He was holding stories. Pain, hope. One letter stood out, torn notebook paper scribbled in rough handwriting. Dear Mr. Tyson, my name is Maddie. I'm 11. My papa died fighting to protect our village. Now I try to be brave. I heard you cry. So maybe even lions cry too? Mike's fingers trembled. He remembered being 11. He remembered his mother's fading voice. He remembered stealing to eat. And he remembered feeling like the world had no place for boys like him. Now, decades later, a boy halfway across the world had just handed him something sacred. Permission to cry. Who is this boy? Mike asked softly. President Traoré placed his hand on Mike's shoulder. He lives nearby. Would you like to meet him? Mike didn't speak. He just nodded. A child's letter cracked open a legend's heart. And now, the man once feared across continents was about to meet the one soul who truly understood him. The next morning, they drove 2 hours across sun-drenched land, dust curling behind their vehicle, goats scattering, children waving. When they arrived, a boy ran barefoot down a dirt path. It was him, Maddie. In his hand, a crumpled photo of his father in uniform, creased and worn from too many nights under his pillow. Mike stepped out slowly, carefully. This wasn't a fan encounter, this was something else. Maddie froze, eyes wide, silent. He wasn't meeting a celebrity. He was meeting a survivor? Just like him. Mike knelt, eye to eye. You're braver than I ever was, little man. Maddie blinked, holding back tears. But I cry, he whispered. Mike smiled gently. So do I. Then, without warning, Maddie stepped forward and hugged him. Not for cameras, not for show, but the kind of hug you give when you're afraid someone will leave again. Mike's arms wrapped around him, and then he broke. Tears streamed down the face of the former champion, not silent ones, sobs, loud, shaking. No cameras were filming, no press, just pain. Shared. Seen. It wasn't about boxing, it was about belonging. For the first time in decades, Mike Tyson wasn't just being hugged. He was being held. By truth. President Traoré stood nearby, hand over his chest, tears in his eyes. Two souls, one man, one boy, were healing in front of him. And in that moment, no title mattered. No spotlight, no stage, just humanity. Later, they all sat beneath a mango tree. Will you leave too? Maddie asked shyly, staring at the ground. Mike looked him in the eye. I'll be back, I promise. And for one, he meant it. When Mike returned to America, the media expected drama, gossip, fights, press tours. Instead, he walked into a national talk show and brought nothing but a folded piece of paper. When the host joked, Africa, huh? Starting a new fight club? Mike chuckled, then paused. No, he said quietly. I was being healed by an 11-year-old boy. Silence swept the room. He pulled out Maddie's letter and read aloud. Even lions cry. His voice cracked, and right there, on live television, the world watched Mike Tyson cry again. He wasn't crying out of weakness. He was crying because strength finally had a place to rest. And in those tears, millions found permission to feel again. I met kids who lost everything, Mike continued, but they have more heart than champions I've ever seen. He looked into the camera. Ibrahim Traoré, thank you for reminding me that real strength isn't in fists, it's in love. The studio audience didn't clap. They sat still. Some cried, some smiled. All of them listened. That night, Mike returned to his apartment. Quiet, still holding the letter. Just before dawn, his phone rang. Unknown number. He picked up. This is President Traoré, the voice said softly. I saw what you did for Maddie. Mike sat up, silent. You didn't just honor his father, Traoré continued. You healed something in him, and in yourself. Then came the invitation. Come back, not just for one boy, for a nation. Tell them your story. Show them what it means to rise from nothing. Mike exhaled. You don't know what that means to me. I do, Traoré said. It wasn't a speaking tour, it was a revolution of hearts. And soon hundreds of children would sit in the dust to hear a message more powerful than any punch Mike Tyson ever threw. 48 hours later, Mike landed again in Burkina Faso. The schoolyard was packed. Hundreds of students in faded uniforms sat cross-legged on the earth, eyes wide, hearts open. Some held notebooks. Others clutched old Tyson posters from newspaper clippings. Mike stood in front of them. No entourage, no bodyguards. Just a man, a chair, and his truth. I used to think I was just a weapon, he said slowly. I didn't know I had a heart until a child helped me find it. He told them about Maddie, about his mother dying, about prison, about fighting because he couldn't cry. And when his voice cracked, boys in the audience began crying too. Boys who thought tears made them weak now saw a lion cry. Mike stepped down, walked into the crowd, and pointed at one boy. You, he said. You think no one sees you, but I do. You're strong, even when you feel broken. the boy cried. Then another. And another. At the back, President Traoré wiped his eyes. This wasn't a speech. This was an awakening. He didn't throw punches. He threw lifelines. And every boy in that yard finally knew they were not invisible. That night, Mike and President Traoré sat again under the stars. This time, as brothers. Mike asked, "Why did you write that letter, Mr. President?" Traoré smiled faintly. "Because I saw the boy behind the fighter, and I believed the world still needed him." Mike didn't reply. He couldn't. His throat closed, his chest heavy. Then Traoré added, "You remind my people that strength isn't about fists. It's about getting up. Every time life knocks you down." Mike nodded. "That's all I ever tried to do." They didn't shake hands. They clasped hands, like family, like survivors. Photos from Mike's visit began to circulate. Not tabloid headlines, not viral gimmicks, just quiet images of a man hugging children, holding letters, whispering to boys, "You matter." He came as a fighter. He left as a healer. And across the ocean, a wounded world began to remember what strength truly looks like. It began with a letter, but it ended with a revolution. Not of politics, but of purpose. And in the end, the toughest man on earth learned that healing is louder than any punch. Back in New York, weeks after his second trip to Burkina Faso, Mike Tyson stepped into the studio where it had all started. Same chair, same lights. But something had changed. He looked older, softer. Like a storm had passed and peace had finally found its place. The host welcomed him back, but this time, there were no jokes, no gimmicks, just silence and respect. "Mike," the host asked gently, "what changed you the most in Burkina Faso?" Mike didn't speak immediately. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a folded paper, and showed it to the camera. A child's drawing, him, Maddie, and President Traoré, all holding hands, all smiling. He stared at the sketch for a long moment, then whispered, "He doesn't want to fight anymore, he just wants to grow." The audience held their breath. For once, the world saw not a champion, not a warrior, not a monster, but a man. And for the first time in decades, that man was at peace. Tears welled in his eyes again. "My whole life," he said softly, "I thought pain made me dangerous. But maybe pain was just trying to be heard." The room was still. The toughest man alive had nothing to sell, only something to share. A truth. That boy, Maddie, he gave me peace, and Traoré, he gave me purpose. And with that, Mike Tyson became something he'd never been before. A mentor. After the show, as the studio lights cooled and cameras stopped, a young staff member knocked gently. She handed Mike a sealed brown envelope. "International mail," she said. Mike raised an eyebrow, carefully opened it. Inside, another letter. From President Ibrahim Traoré. The handwriting familiar, the message unforgettable. "My brother Mike, they call me president. But I'm just a man who dreams of healing, of peace. Your visit reminded us all. Pain isn't the end. It's the beginning. If we dare to feel it, not fight it. Burkina Faso thanks you. I thank you. And the boy, he now sleeps peacefully." Mike pressed the letter to his chest. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he whispered something the world never expected. "I was never the baddest man on the planet. I was just a boy, waiting to be heard. It took 1 week for the world's fiercest fighter to become something far rarer, a man who chose truth over toughness." A few days later, Mike stood on a balcony in Harlem. Below, a group of young boys boxed with old gloves, sparring in pairs, chasing dreams. One of them fell hard. The others laughed, but not Mike. He walked down, lifted the boy gently, and said, "Every fall teaches you how to rise." Just then, his phone buzzed. A photo from Burkina Faso. There stood Madi, grinning ear to ear. Beside him, a brand new boxing gym. The sign above read, Tyson Hope Center, sponsored by the government of Burkina Faso, signed by President Ibrahim Traoré. Mike stared at the photo. He didn't smile, he closed his eyes, and let a single tear fall. The man once feared across the world had become a father figure to nations, and across the sea a broken child stood tall, because Mike Tyson finally stood still long enough to be seen. Weeks passed. The Tyson Hope Center became more than a gym. It became a sanctuary. Kids from war-torn villages trained there, yes. But they also cried there, shared stories, wrote letters to boys they'd never meet. One letter read, Dear Mike Tyson, I fight with my mind now. You taught me that. My fists are for love now. Word of the center spread. UN officials came to visit. Celebrities donated, but Mike never talked about it in interviews. When asked, he simply said, That's not my story, it's theirs. Meanwhile, President Traoré, quiet, steady, humble, began shifting policies, funding education, reforming rural programs, prioritizing mental health. The world noticed. But Traoré never claimed credit. He always said, A fighter taught me how to lead. They were never supposed to meet. One born in Brooklyn chaos, the other in Sahel silence. But pain is the same in any language, and healing even more so. Months later, a new international conference was held in Geneva. Topic: Trauma recovery in post-conflict nations. Survivors, doctors, diplomats, children. And then, unexpectedly, two men walked on stage. Mike Tyson, Ibrahim Traoré. No teleprompters, no speeches, just stories. Tyson spoke first. Not about belts, not about boxing, but about Madi, about the letter, about the day he finally let himself cry in public. I thought tears were weakness, he said, but that's a lie we're told as boys. Real strength is choosing to feel anyway. Traoré followed. He didn't preach. He didn't promote. He simply said, Every nation has broken boys. We must show them they are seen. That's how you stop wars, before they start. The room stood in ovation, not because of fame, but because of truth. Two men, scarred by different battles, stood before the world, not as leaders, but as proof. You can be broken and still rise. Back in Burkina Faso, something magical began. Boys once angry smiled more. Teachers reported fewer fights, more journal entries, more letters. One wall in the Tyson Hope Center held a quote now etched in bold paint. Even lions cry. It became a mantra, a prayer, a flag for every boy who ever thought strength meant silence. One day, President Traoré returned to the Tyson Hope Center without cameras. He met with Madi, now taller, still quiet. Do you remember your letter? Traoré asked. Madi nodded. He pulled it out from his back pocket. Still folded, still sacred. The president smiled. Would you like to write a new one? Madi grinned and picked up a pen. The first letter healed a fighter. This one would inspire a future. Weeks later, Mike received a final envelope. Inside, Madi's new letter. Dear Mr. Tyson, I'm not scared anymore. I still cry, but I also laugh now. And when other boys feel pain, I show them your video. They say it makes them feel brave. I tell them it's okay to fall, because you taught me how to rise. Thank you for not leaving, for coming back, for becoming real. Mike read the letter and then placed it beside the original. No frame, no glass, just beside each other, like the man and the boy, forever connected.